It was a regular afternoon in the busy city, but for a small, abandoned puppy, this was anything but a normal day. On a street corner, beneath the harsh sun, a tiny, scruffy puppy lay alone, looking lost and vulnerable. His fur was dirty, and his eyes told the story of loneliness. No one knew how he had ended up there, but one thing was clear: he had no one to care for him. This little puppy had been abandoned, left to fend for himself in a world that seemed too big and too dangerous for such a small creature. He scrounged for food wherever he could find it, darting away from loud noises and curious glances. Yet, despite all the hardship, there was something different about him, a spark of determination and inner strength. As the world rushed by, he sat there, waiting. But then, something unusual caught his attention. Across the street, a young girl in a bright yellow dress was walking with her mother. She was laughing, her innocent joy lighting up the busy street. The puppy's tail twitched, and his eyes followed the girl. But just as the girl bent down to tie her shoelace, something dark and unexpected happened. A man, with a cold, calculating look in his eyes, moved towards the girl. He wasn't just walking, he was creeping closer, his intentions clear. The puppy's heart began to race. Something was wrong. In that moment, something inside him snapped. He couldn't stay silent, couldn't stay hidden anymore. The puppy, once just a stray, now had a chance to make a difference. His small legs moved faster than they ever had before. He had no idea what was ahead, but one thing was for sure: this puppy was about to stop a crime that no one saw coming. The puppy had never been this scared in his life. He had been alone for so long that nothing seemed to bother him anymore, until today. His eyes locked onto the man, who was inching closer to the young girl, and something deep within him stirred. Instincts. Protection. The tiny puppy's heart raced faster than it ever had, and without thinking, he sprinted across the pavement, dodging obstacles, his paws pounding against the ground. The girl was just standing there, innocently adjusting her shoelace, unaware of the danger closing in. But the puppy knew better. The man's intentions were clear. The puppy had seen enough cruelty in his short life to recognize a threat when it was right in front of him. With every ounce of his strength, the puppy bolted forward, barking as loudly as he could, hoping to get the girl's attention. He was small, yes, but he had the courage of a lion. He lunged at the man's leg, his teeth sinking into the fabric of his pants. The man stumbled, momentarily thrown off balance. "What the?" "Get off me," the man growled, shaking his leg violently. But the puppy didn't let go. He was undeterred, his tiny body now clinging to the man's ankle like a warrior in battle. The girl's eyes widened as she saw what was happening. Her hands flew to her mouth in shock. But the man wasn't about to let a small puppy stop him. He kicked at the puppy, hard. The force sent the little dog tumbling to the ground, his tiny body sliding across the pavement. The girl screamed for help.
"Mom."
"Help," she cried, her voice high with panic. But the puppy wasn't finished. Dazed but not defeated, he picked himself up and charged once more, his determination unshaken. Fear filled him, but he pushed it aside. This was no longer about him. This was about the girl. He had to protect her. He wasn't going to let her fall into the hands of this monster. With one last burst of energy, the puppy launched himself at the man's leg again, biting down with all his might. The man howled in pain, his hand gripping the girl's arm tighter in his desperation. He tried to pull her away, but the puppy was now hanging on for dear life. The man was furious, but his anger only made him reckless. He swung wildly, and in that moment, the girl's mother came rushing forward, grabbing her daughter just in time. But the puppy? He wasn't backing down. His teeth sank deeper, and for the first time, the man realized he was losing control. The man cried out, his grip weakening. The girl was free. The puppy released his hold and took a few steps back, panting heavily, his body trembling with exhaustion. But inside, he felt something powerful. Triumph. He had done it. He had saved her. The girl, Sophie, stumbled backward, wide-eyed and breathless. She had never been so scared in her life, but now, she was free. Her mother, running towards her, enveloped her in a protective embrace. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" she whispered urgently, checking her over for any signs of harm. Sophie nodded, still in shock, her hand gripping her puppy tightly. "I'm okay, but he saved me," she stammered, her eyes darting to the puppy, who stood before her, panting heavily but still alert. The man, now furious, glared at the puppy. He was disoriented from the pain in his leg, his face red with rage. "You little mutt," he shouted, his voice full of venom. He took a step toward the puppy, intent on getting rid of the tiny creature that had thwarted his plan. But the puppy, though trembling with exhaustion, stood his ground. He wasn't about to back down now. Sophie's heart raced, fear mixing with a deep sense of gratitude. The puppy had risked everything to save her, and now he was putting himself in danger again. She couldn't let him face this alone. "Mom," Sophie cried, her voice trembling. "Please, we need to help him." She looked desperately at her mother, who was already reaching for her phone, ready to call for help. But before they could react, the kidnapper took another step forward, seething with anger. He reached for Sophie again, his hands grabbing for her arm, his eyes wild with frustration. "You think you can stop me? You think this little dog can protect you?" The puppy, though clearly exhausted and battered, wasn't ready to let the man succeed. With a snarl, he lunged at the man's ankle again, but this time, he was weaker, slower. His tiny teeth barely grazed the man's pant leg, but it was enough. The man stumbled, cursing under his breath. In that crucial moment, the puppy's actions gave Sophie and her mother the window they needed. Sophie's mother grabbed her daughter's hand, pulling her towards safety. "Run, Sophie. Now." But as they started to flee, the man took one last desperate swing, his fist aimed at the puppy. Just as he was about to land the blow, a loud bark echoed through the alley. The puppy, despite everything, stood tall. His bark was louder than before, as if he was summoning help. He wasn't alone anymore. From behind a corner, a much larger dog appeared, a big brown mutt that had been lurking nearby. It growled, its teeth bared, its stance defensive. The kidnapper paused, turning slowly to face the new threat. The larger dog stepped forward, its growl low and threatening. For a brief moment, the man hesitated. He wasn't expecting this. The larger dog, sensing the danger, barked loudly again, positioning itself between the kidnapper and Sophie's family. The puppy, though weary, stood bravely beside the big dog, his tail stiff and his stance protective. Together, they made an impressive pair, one small and one large, united in their mission to protect. The kidnapper, realizing that he was outnumbered and outmatched, took one last glance at Sophie, his expression twisted in frustration. "This isn't over," he hissed, his voice trembling with rage. But he knew he was no match for the two dogs. With a final glance at Sophie, he turned and ran, disappearing into the dark alley. Sophie stood still for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never felt so relieved in her life. The man was gone and she was safe. She looked down at the puppy, who was now exhausted but still standing, his head high with pride. "Thank you," Sophie whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "You saved me. You're my hero." The larger dog, still keeping watch, relaxed its stance but stayed close. Sophie's mother, now breathing easier, knelt beside her daughter and the puppy. "You're both so brave," she said, her voice soft but full of admiration. Sophie hugged the puppy close to her chest, her heart swelling with gratitude. "We can't leave him out here, Mom," she said, looking up with determination. "We need to take him home with us." Her mother smiled gently, her eyes filled with understanding. "I think you're right," she said. "Let's get him home." As the three of them walked away from the dark alley, Sophie held the puppy in her arms, feeling a deep sense of comfort. The man was gone, and the puppy had won. He had saved her life, and now he would be part of their family. Together, they walked into the night, knowing that nothing could ever tear them apart again. Sophie's breath was still shaky as she and her mother hurried toward home, the puppy cradled safely in Sophie's arms. The dark alleyway felt like a distant memory now, but Sophie's heart was still racing, her mind replaying the terrifying moments. Her legs felt heavy, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins, but nothing mattered now except for one thing: getting the puppy home. The little dog, who had risked everything to protect her, was clearly exhausted. His tiny body was weary, his movements slower than before, but he refused to give up. With every step, Sophie could feel the warmth of his small form nestled against her chest. He wasn't just a pet anymore, he was family. Sophie glanced at her mother, her face a mixture of relief and lingering fear. Her mother, though worn out herself, walked beside her with determination. She hadn't said much, but Sophie knew what her mother was thinking. Today, they hadn't just saved a dog. They had formed a bond that would never break. "Mom, we're taking him home," Sophie whispered, her voice filled with conviction. She could feel the weight of the puppy's trust on her shoulders. He had given everything to keep her safe, and now she was going to return that protection, that love. Her mother gave a small, understanding smile. "We are, sweetheart," she replied. "He's one of us now." The journey to their home was quiet, the streets peaceful, but Sophie's mind was anything but. The terror they had just faced felt so far behind, yet it was so fresh in her heart. She looked down at the puppy, who was now nestled comfortably in her arms, his little head resting against her chest, content despite his exhaustion. "You're my hero," Sophie murmured to the puppy, her voice filled with emotion. "You saved me. You'll always be safe with us now." As they walked through the neighborhood, nearing their home, Sophie realized that this wasn't just about escaping danger, it was about starting a new chapter. The puppy, with his unwavering courage, had brought them closer, united them in a way she hadn't imagined. They weren't just escaping fear anymore, they were embracing something beautiful: love, protection, and a home. With each step they took toward the house, Sophie knew that nothing could ever tear them apart. The puppy, though small and tired, had become a symbol of hope, bravery, and the bond that had formed between them. As they reached the doorstep of their home, Sophie's heart began to settle. The weight of everything that had just happened was starting to lift, and the terror from the alley was slowly fading into the background. The puppy, still cradled in Sophie's arms, seemed to be at peace now, his small body relaxing as he breathed steadily. Sophie's mother opened the door, ushering them inside. The warmth of their home wrapped around them, offering a sense of safety and comfort that Sophie hadn't realized she craved so deeply. "He's home now," Sophie whispered softly, her eyes brimming with gratitude as she looked at the puppy. Her mother smiled, gently brushing the puppy's fur. "Yes, sweetheart. He's home." Sophie carefully placed the puppy on the soft couch, watching as he curled up in a ball, exhausted but content. A sense of relief washed over Sophie, knowing the danger was over and the puppy would never have to face such fear again. With her arms around him, Sophie whispered, "You're safe. We're safe." The puppy's tail gave a small, satisfied wag as if to agree. The nightmare was behind them and a new chapter had begun. In that moment, Sophie knew the puppy had found his forever home. And so had she. As the days went by, Sophie's puppy settled into his new life, filled with love and care. Sophie's heart swelled with joy as she watched him play in the yard, his tail wagging nonstop. The little dog had transformed from a frightened stray to a cherished family member, always by her side, his eyes sparkling with trust and loyalty. Sophie's mother smiled as she watched them together. "He's truly part of the family now," she said, her voice filled with warmth. The puppy had found his forever home, and Sophie had found a best friend, one who had saved her life. In the quiet of their home, Sophie held her puppy close, feeling a deep sense of peace. The terror of that day had long passed, and now, all that remained was the love they shared. They were safe, and they were together, and that was all that mattered. If you loved this heartwarming story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing tales of bravery, love, and loyalty.